Hello, everyone. I'm Aaron from DataStax, and I'm here to take you through part number 6 of our migrating an enterprise e-commerce site to the Table API. And in this case, we're going to focus on the user profile subsystem and using single sign-on with Google. We actually have that built into our workshop, Astra Apparel website here, so that you can go ahead and see, hey, here's the you click on login, and then here's the Google option, and you can click Google, and it should sign you in just fine. So hey, that's what we're going to work on today. Let's go have a look and get started. So if we have a look at our website, where the single sign-on and user profile functionality comes into play is when you go over to the login button up here. Now, as you can see, we have a Google button that's kind of appeared in the middle. There is some additional configuration that needs to happen in the Google console with OAuth 2 to go ahead and make this work. That is actually detailed inside the workshop material that we put together a few years ago, and really isn't the focus here. So we're not gonna talk too much about that. But suffice to say that with the proper setup, you can go ahead and you can click on that. It logs you in using Google, and now we can go back and go about our business on the site. Let's go ahead and actually click on the user profile button, and you can see that this is what it's gleaned from my Google account. So this functionality is what we're going to convert to the Table API today. So it's important to note that we have two tables we need to concern ourselves with today. We have user by email, and we have user. And if I go ahead, have a look at that e-commerce key space, describe the tables. There we go. It's a desk table user. There we go. User ID is our primary key. Has various things about our profile. And then we can also say desk table user by email. And as you can see, user by email is a simple two-column table. It has a user email as its lone primary key, and it has user ID as its payload column. This is a data modeling technique that used to be used quite often in the early days of Cassandra, called building a manual index. And the idea here is that sometimes you want to be able to query a user by something other than the user ID. So in this case, we created our manual index to have user by email and return that user ID, and then we can use the user ID to go ahead and pull back the user data from the user table. Ideally, with the Table API, we could make this go away and query on whatever it is that we wanted to query the user table on. But for the purposes of today, we'll just go ahead in recreating the exact functionality that we have, and then make a note about maybe moving past that additional table for a future session. Okay, so if you remember, the first thing we need to do is create a table entity class. So what I'm going to do, and so we need two of those, and let's say new class, and we'll say user table entity. Just like that. Let's get rid of our extra spaces and, oh, actually, you know what here? Yeah, let's get rid of JSON property. We're going to say entity table name equals users. Let's make sure of that. Oh, user, singular. I'm glad I double checked. All right. Just do that. Let's say name equals, just like that. There we go. And let's make sure that we have the name property inside that. There we go. Now we're also going to need this, yeah, right here for last name and session ID. also need one for password timestamp. There we go. Let's just double check those column names. Yep. Okay, that looks okay. And let's go ahead and make sure that we're doing a partition by, and we'll just say ordinal 0, and let's go ahead and import that. There we are. Now let's go ahead and bring in our getters and setters. Source, generate getters and setters. Select all, generate. Okay, there we go. Our entity table should be good here for user. Now, let's go ahead and create the user by email entity table. There we go. Entity table, user by email, and user by email, that is correct. Oh, and you know what? Copilot got this all correct. Yeah. User ID, user email. Let's bring in our partition by. Let's bring in column from the DataStax Astra client. Let's also bring in UUID. All right, here we are, we're good. Next, let's have a look at the Data API configuration class. Let's go ahead and create 2 beans here. So let's say bean table user. And say public table user table entity, and we can import that. And yep, table exists, user. Yep. Else. There. Well, for some reason that got all formatted improperly here. There. And I just noticed that it should be table entity, not entity table. Yeah. So let's fix that. Now, of course, it's going to complain, so we'll rename the file, and that should be okay then. All right. Now, let's basically reduce this user by email, user by email table entity. Let's import that. And user by table. Yep. User by email. There we go. And let's also get our correct entity class down there. Okay. Now we're okay. All right, so that's our Data API configuration. Let's go ahead and have a look at Data API services. Actually, before we do that, let's have a look at the user REST controller here. So we can get rid of these 2 repositories. We no longer have to pull them in here. There we go. And then we can also pass that there. Get rid of private. There we go. And then we can save this. There. Just like that. we have some errors on the side here. So these are the methods that we'll need to account for given everything that we've just broken. So first one I see here is this user by email repo find by ID email. So, and we are going to want to auto wire up these tables. And we want table.users. Oh, user singular. And that's going to be table user table entity. And let's go ahead and import that in. And next we want to say table, let's get our qualifier, and we want user by email, and then we can say table user by email table entity, and let's import that entity class as well. There it is. Took a second. All right. Okay, so now we have that. So if we go all the way to the bottom then, let's go ahead and start putting our methods in here. So here's what we need. We need user by email, find by ID. All right, so public, optional, and we want to say user by email table entity, get user by email, and we're creating a new filter, map of email, and then returning that. Okay, so now I can go back to here and say data API services, get user by email. There. And of course, this returns the wrong type of entity. Let's make sure we pull that in. Okay, so we got around that one. Excellent. Moving on here. Yeah, so we also want to be able to adjust that user by email entity and save it. So let's say table entity. There we go. And data API services. And we'll say save user by email. There. Then we can go back to here and say, let's see, let's look at another save that we've done here. Yeah, just public void it's the same thing we did for cart product. So let's go ahead and do that. So public void save user by email. There we go. And I can go back to here and save user by email works. Okay. We also need a save method for the regular user repository as well. So in this case, we're going to say data API services, save user, just like that. And then kind of the same thing. We can go back to here and say public void save user. User table entity user, user repository, insert one. All right, outstanding. And user here needs to be a user table entity. Oh, and then we need to define user table entity right there. Okay. All right. So next, we have a find by ID or a get by ID for the user repo. So same thing. Let's say data API services, and we'll say get user by ID. This is going to return an optional user table entity, just like that. So let's go ahead and copy that. Go back to Data API Services, public, optional, user table entity, get user by ID. There we are. And we can go back. All right. Oh, did that make it of type string? It did. We're going to make that UUID. There we go. That should make it work. All right, moving on down the line. Okay, so we have a map user request. Actually, I can get rid of a lot of the commented out code there. Let's go down to our mapper. Yeah, here's map user. So we're just going to say map user table entity. And really, that should do it. Okay. So, yep, that gets us past this user authentication. Yep, and that's the specific OAuth 2 user method right there. Okay, so let's continue on here. So now we have the regular user repository with a find by ID, which I think we can just say Data API Services get user by ID. Oh, let's get rid of that, and then user table entity. Okay. Hey, moving on along here. Okay, user by email repository, find by ID email. All right. Well, we've done this before too. So if we go all the way back up here and have a look at Data API Services, get user by email. And now we can just take that right down here and user by email table entity. All right. And then next issue we have is with the user repository, find by ID. And this is just get user by user ID right there. And user table entity. All right. Okay, on to the next one. Create user. Here we go. So again, we have user by email repo, find by ID, user email. So let's just go. Yeah, here we go. Data API Services, get user by email. And user by email table entity. Perfect. Okay. Well, look at that. We're about halfway done with our controller here. So once we get a lot of these methods in, actually getting the rest of them is pretty simple, because they do a lot of the same methods get reused. So now let's say, now we want to be able to save both here. So let's do Data API Services, save user E, and then Data API Services, save user by email, and this is user by email E. There. Oh, the data types are wrong. So user by email table entity, that fixes one. Let's go ahead and fix user E. Here we go. User table entity, user. Okay. So now we're back to finding our user by ID. Data API Services, get user by ID. There we go. And user table entity. All right. Okay. User by email. Okay, so get user by email, table entity. And we can go down. Here we go, user find by ID and user table entity. Okay. And then let's go with make sure we're using the new table entities, and then we can say data API services, save user by email. There we go. Oh, and we also have an old entry here that we're deleting. So in this case, it's going to be delete user by email. Yeah. Delete user by, we'll just say user by email and then old email. So now we can go into data API services. You can say public void delete user by email. And that's going to be, yep, string email. Delete one. All right, outstanding. Okay, that checks out. Now we can say data API services, save user. Oh, where is user E? Here we go, user table entity. There we go. Now I can go back down here and data API services, save user. There we go, that works. Okay, almost done. Next is, you know, the login user for manual login. I don't think that we actually have this coded up to be used right now, but it could be used if you wanted it to. So let's do data API services, get user by ID, user table entity. There we go. All right, well that was easy. Okay, and we're almost done here. So same thing, user find by ID. There we go. Let's scroll down. User table entity. Here we go, user table entity. And then we can say data API services. And we want save user. All right. I believe we're done. Data API services looks good. User REST controller looks good. All right. I think we're in good shape here. So let's go ahead and do a run as Java application. There goes our e-commerce application. All right, let's go and check. Okay, here we go. We have our site. Let's go up and say login and use our Google account. Okay. Well, something's not working quite right here. Oh, yep, here we go. Let's take a look at what we did here. Unknown columns. Okay. So this is happening in data API services, get user by email. User REST controller 111. Okay, let's have a look here. Get user by email. Oh, I wonder if it's not just email. I wonder if it's user email. Yeah, that's what it looks like in the table entity. And if we have a look at user by email, it's user_email. Okay, so that's going to be a problem. Let's go ahead and fix that. Okay, so we have get user by email. Save user, yep, user. Oh, okay, and we're also going to want to do user_email there as well. Okay, good thing we caught that. Let's give that another shot. The lesson here is to double check those table names and column names yourself. Don't rely on Copilot to get it right. All right, let's try this again. And we'll say login and Google. Oh, it still didn't like that. Unsupported CQL type. All right, everyone. I went and got some clarity on the error that we're seeing around the addresses user-defined type on the user table. And it turns out that user-defined types are not supported yet in the table API. So that's something that we're going to have to address at a future time. But for the interim, let's just see if we can work our way around this. So if I have a look and say desk table user, you can see that, yep, our columns come back here, and we have this addresses list frozen address. So that is our user-defined type inside of a list, because a user could have, multiple addresses. So that's what we have here. So let's have a look. Let's say desk type address. And you can see, yep, this is our address user-defined type. The point is that we're going to be unable to use this in our solution for now. So let's jump back to our IDE for a second here. All right. And there are some adjustments that we're going to need to make here. First of all, inside of the user table entity, we need to make sure that that addresses property is commented out. And that's also going to have an issue with our assessor methods. So let's get rid of both of those. There we go. Next, let's go back to the Data API Services class. And in this Get User by ID, we're also going to have to make some adjustments here. The first thing we're going to do is create a projection object. And what this projection object allows us to do is to explicitly specify the properties or columns that we want to bring back in our results set. And it also allows us to specify, more importantly, the ones we want to skip. So let's go ahead and say projection. Yeah, Copilot, that doesn't work. And inside it, we're going to specify the columns that we don't want, and it's just one. So we're just going to say addresses, like that. And that's going to have a value of false. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and create a table options object here. And specifically, this is going to be a table find one options. Yep. And we're going to say, yep, dot projection, and let's import that. All right, and then we can say find one filter, and we'll just send options. All right, that should do it. So that should allow us to retrieve our user data minus our list of addresses per user, just for now. So let's give this a shot. Okay, we are running. And if we go back over to here, okay, things come up. Oh, look, and our login changed to log out. So that actually must have worked. So if I go ahead and click on the person outline looking icon here for the profile, you can see that, oh, yep, this is what our user profile system has pulled from my Google account. So just, yep, Aaron Pletz, and then email address of aaron.plutz@datastacks.com. Now, the rest of this is all address information, so I'm not going to bother making an adjustment here. But yeah, as you can see, this is working, and we can now log in and log out with our Google single sign-on account. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for joining me for yet another video where we work on migrating our enterprise e-commerce website over to use the DataStax Table API. In this video, we had a look at the user profile service. We actually ran into some issues with it and kind of showed how to troubleshoot through those and ultimately get the application running. Thanks everyone who tuned in, and we'll talk to you later. Want more information on modernizing your self-managed Cassandra deployments? Head on out to datastacks.com/modernize-apache-cassandra-workloads, and you'll find all the information you need on keeping your self-managed Cassandra cluster updated and in top running form. Thank you, and have a great day.